part 2 of chapter 10, where we dig into the interview questions that we slightly talked about yesterday. So I'm going to jump right into it because we have to go over quite a bit. Hopefully, um, I, I keep thinking that you guys had your meeting yesterday. If you did have it yesterday, I hope it went well. But getting into the interview type questions. So when you have your interview at some point, as we all know, if you've ever had an interview before, there are a series of questions that you will be asked. Now, maybe we may have noticed that all the questions are not the same, but we may not have really paid attention to or even know that these questions are categorical, meaning that they come in different categories in terms of the questions that they ask and why they ask those questions. There's 3 different sets of questions. One group is called the general information questions. We know those, we're familiar with those. They always typically start out with, tell me about yourself, let me tell you about the company, is what they'll follow up with those type questions, and we'll dig into those. They also have what they call behavioral questions, and these are always past tense based questions centered around, something you've done in your past. Typically, it'll start out with, tell me about a time when, right? And then we have what we call stress related questions or hypothetical questions. And this is where they dig into the actual job that you'll be doing. And those questions are more futuristic. They'll typically start with, what would you do if? So we're going to explore all 3 sets of questions. Now, when an interview starts out, I always tell people to bring a notepad and a pen so that you can have not just take notes and look studious and look like you're paying attention, but you're actually going to have some notes already written on your notepad. After you've done your research with the company, you may have some questions. Like if you're really interested in this company, you're really interested in starting your career with this company, you may have questions about the company itself. You may also have questions about the position. Maybe you've done some research, you see that they had just got a new contract with the, down in Fort Myers, and it's with the city. But then maybe they've mentioned like a couple of different projects on that contract, and you may have some questions about that because you don't know if you're going to be on that project, if it's going to be multiple projects, whatever your questions may be. You'll want to have those jotted down. When the interview first starts, right? Um, they may start out with responding to any number of questions that are on the screen, whether it's tell me about yourself, what jobs have you held, what interested in you in the position. Or they may start out with them telling you about the company. So let's say they start out with asking you one of these questions. Regardless of what question they ask, what they really want to know is, why did you choose their company? So whether they ask you that question specifically, why did you want to work for this company? Whether they ask it as the first question or they ask it as a follow-up, typically they're going to ask that question. What I tend to do, whether they ask that question first or not, I answer that question while I'm answering any other question that they asked as a general question. So if they say, okay, Cynthia, thank you so much for coming to this job interview. Why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself? I already know the follow-up question is going to be, why are you at this company? So what I do, I always start with my interest or my desire in the field itself. So if I were in electrical, I think about what drew me to the field. Maybe I have an uncle and he has his own business. I've been tinkering around with him every now and then, talking to him, asking him questions about electrical. He is what, his business, got me interested in the field. At some point, I decided to go to school. So I'm going to start there. So Cynthia, tell me about yourself. I'm gonna say, well, you know what? I've always kind of been interested in, the electrical field. My uncle has his own business, and I used to, always go, and I always found myself being very curious about what he's doing, how things work, asking him a bunch of questions. I did some work not in electrical. I actually started out working in accounting, and I was working for this company, and I did some customer service work. I did some, whatever I did. I won't spend too much time on that talking about that company. What I'll try to do is talk about any soft skills that I've seen on their job description that's important. So let's say they did project management. They wanted someone with project management. I'll say, I did some accounting. We worked on a lot of different projects. I worked on a project team there. Then I moved over to working for CVS, and I did some inventory management. And I had to do a lot of, um, time sensitive type work. But it was really nagging me to go back to school and really, get started in electrical. So I decided to get started in electrical. Well, while I was working in electrical, now let's say that you're going to be working like at Duke Energy or something, and maybe they have the new project, that they have down in Fort Myers. um, while I was doing my research at going to school doing electrical field, I started, doing some research on the different companies I want to work for. What interested me in this position in particular is that I noticed you guys do a lot of project-based work. I know that you have this contract out in Fort Myers, but that you have several other projects as well. And so I felt like this would be a good place for me to get my start because I really like the fact that you guys not only work with government work, but you also do project work with corporations. And I felt like it'll be a good opportunity for me to learn. All right, what did I just do? One, I told them I'm really interested in the industry. Companies want to know that you're not just looking for a job. When you get into a career, they want to hear the love story of why you want to be in that career, just like if a doctor is going to be a doctor. They want to hear that doctor talk about how they love helping people. No hospital wants to hear a doctor say, well, I was looking for a job and I know being a doctor pays a lot of money. Like you're not going to get the job saying that. You're going to get the job saying that you want to make a difference, that you love the human life, that you love medicine, or whatever field you're in. They want to hear that same love story. So you're going to tell the love story of what made you fall in love with the electrical field. Go through your resume very quickly. If it has no electrical work, focus in on your soft skills, and then get to the point of why you're there at their particular company. If you weave your answer that way, most times they won't even have a follow-up question. And remember, like I said, there'll be a series of maybe 10 or 12 questions they have to ask everyone. If you can knock out those two questions at the general information level, they'll love it because they'll think, good, that's one less question I need to ask. Whenever I do it that way, I always get the same response. Oh, good, you already answered 3 of my questions. I'm like, yeah, because I already know you're going to ask the same question. So they love it. I've never seen a company that did not like me giving it to them that way. What they'll typically do after that is say, okay, well, let me tell you a little bit about our company. You're going to already know about their company. You're going to know who their CEO is. You're going to know as much as you can that they have posted. They're going to start out with the basics. You're going to be nodding your head. And one thing that you're going to do, whatever question that you may have, whether it's about the company, about the position, never wait till the end of the interview to ask questions. Always ask questions throughout the process. So, number one, it's like playing cards. Never let them see your hand. Never let them know whatever question that you're asking is an issue, is not an issue, none of the above. You want to give the impression that you're just having a natural conversational rapport with them. Maybe you were curious about something, but never let on that any question that you have is or isn't a deal breaker. Remember, this is a competition and they're going to interview someone else right after you. And you don't want them to feel like, oh, okay, well, Cynthia kind of, was asking about, is there overtime? Does she care if there's overtime? Is that going to be an issue for her? So what you do is when they talk about the subject, so maybe you did some research on the company and you noticed that they were talking about projects, but maybe it seemed like there was some travel involved. So maybe you had a question about that. Wait till the the opportunity arises for you to bring it up. Typically, it'll be during the general information session when they're telling you a little bit about the company, or it'll be during the stress related questions section when they start talking about that position. So if they say, okay, let me tell you a little bit about us, our CEO's name is Sam Cook. He started this company and blah, blah, blah. We're here, we're there, we're everywhere. This is type of work that we do. The project that you'll be on will be downtown, and it'll be in multiple locations. You had a question about that. That's when you bring it up. Oh yeah, I saw it was going to be in multiple locations. So will this position work in both of those locations? Um, oh no, so you'll just get training in that one location, but we're actually wrapping that location up. So we're going to have you focus on just the downtown. You got your question answered. It came in a conversational way. They don't know if it's an issue for you or not. Maybe it was an issue for you because you share your car with a family member and you didn't have time to be jumping back and forth. Maybe you had to pick your kid up or something, right? So that was a concern for you. What just happened? You just got that question answered. It seemed like it was just a natural conversation. To them, it's like, okay, you're just interested and you're asking a clarifying question. They don't need to know it's an issue or it's not an issue. You don't say something like, oh yeah, I was concerned because I share a car. Like, don't ever tell your personal business. Get that question answered. It seems like a conversation, move on. So that's how you ask those questions. Once you get past the general information questions, what's going to happen then, you're going to move into what we call behavioral questions. They still need to know a little bit about you. Now, the questions, especially if you don't have a lot of experience, these questions are going to be very generic. They're going to fall in three different categories as well. The behavioral type questions are going to be centered around either something to do with a customer, something to do with your coworker, or something to do with your boss. If it's a customer, it's going to have something to do with the customer having an issue and how did you solve the problem. I don't care how you solve the problem, the customer always needs to have walked away happy. So what are you going to have on your notepad? A situation where you've had to deal with a customer and they walked away happy. Maybe you remember you had that time you had to deal with Larry. Larry had an issue. Maybe he was the person at CVS and he was complaining because something was wrong and you had to help Larry and he walked away happy. That's the story you're going to tell. So have you, and maybe you'll just have on your notepad Larry, because sometimes when we're in our interview, we get very nervous and we forget when they ask us these questions and we can't remember something off the top of our head. That's why it's good to have a notepad. They don't know what Larry means, but you know what Larry means. So you're going to tell the Larry story. What are you going to tell? You're not going to focus in on, I don't care how irate Larry was. You're not going to tell that part of the story. You're just going to say Larry had an issue. Only focus on the issue that Larry had. Larry was, having a concern because he had this order online and he got here and the order wasn't what he thought it was and he needed it because of XYZ. Here's what I did to make Larry happy. Here's what you did to solve Larry's issue. They want to know that you are a problem solver and you can make the customer satisfied. The customer may not have to get the answer that they want, but they want to know that you walked the customer to the conclusion. So even if you have to tell a customer no, think about it. What we hate most of all is when we're dealing with people in customer service and they don't seem as if they're vested in your issue. You can tell me no, but it's how you tell me no, right? Like tell me, let me down easy. So they want to keep their relationships with their customers. So they just want to know that you know how to even walk a customer to the answer, whether it's yes or no, and the customer does not feel, like they were mistreated. For all intensive purposes, they walked away satisfied, even if it's not with the answer that they want. They walked away with a satisfactory answer. They want to know that you have the ability to do that and that you understand it. They may, on the other hand, or in addition to, ask you a question about a coworker. Most times, if it's about a coworker, it's going to be with a non-performing coworker, whether it's the coworker's fault or not. It could just be the coworker doesn't understand the project. It could be the coworker's having some issues, personal issues. Maybe their car broke down, whatever. If they ask you a coworker question, it's going to be, tell me about a time when a coworker was not performing. What did you do? They want to hear you say that you know how to be a team player. So what do they not want to hear? They don't want to hear a story where you had to go rat out the coworker. Never tell a rat out the story, rat out the coworker story. So maybe there was a time when you were working with Tamika and Tamika was having a very difficult time. Let's say you were doing your accounting job and she just could not understand the process. So she kept getting it wrong. You went to Tamika, you helped her understand what she was doing wrong, and Tamika was successful. Any story that you have that you've dealt with a coworker and you've helped that coworker is what they want to hear, right? So if you have your little Tamika story right under Larry, just have Tamika. You don't know if they're going to ask you a customer question or a coworker question, but you still have two questions, two answers that you can go to. The third question, the third category could be your manager. 9 times out of 10, if it's a manager, it is a manage up situation. Most times, the issues with managers have to do with them giving you too many different deadlines. Them forgetting they gave you one deadline and now they want you to do something else, or maybe you're having an issue with something that they gave you. They want to know that you know how to go to the manager and watch this, ask clarifying questions, but more importantly, offer up solutions. So Tom, he gave you two different. Tell me about a time you had a situation where your boss was giving you conflicting information. Like, how did you handle that? Well, one time, think about it. Has that ever happened? If you've ever had a job, it's probably happened before. Maybe you had a boss named Tom. Tom did that to you. What did you do? Well, and maybe you haven't done it, but think about how you did solve it. What are they looking for though? They're looking for you talking about how you went to Tom and you helped to solve the issue. So hopefully you have an example like that where you've gone to Tom. Maybe Tom gave you one date and you went to Tom and said, okay, but Tom, remember we had this other thing going on. Maybe we should do it this way or that way. If you've ever had a situation when you've had to go to your boss and offer up a separate solution to a problem and you work together, that is what they want to hear. At the end of the day, they just want to hear you know how to manage up, is what it's called. Sometimes you have to manage the manager by offering up solutions and not just going to a manager asking them to solve your problems. So if you have those three examples at the ready, and when they ask one of those questions, 9 times out of 10, are they always going to be exactly like that? No. They could give you a more specific scenario, but because these are past tense situations, they have to ask in a generic way because they don't really know the job that you've done. So a lot of this is really going to be based on how you think and how you behave, not necessarily the exact situation. Now, once they get satisfied with that, they'll probably move right into what we call the stress questions. These are hypothetical questions, and most times they are, um, you know, positioned in the sense of you working in their company. So the good part is it's still going to be a scenario based out of a customer, a coworker, or a manager. So the hypothetical questions are still going to fall within those same three categories. The only difference is they're going to place you at their company. So if you're going to work for Duke Energy and it's going to be, like working with that government entity, the customer is going to be the government. So they will be the customer. You can even do some research on Google and look up, you know, um, interview questions, typical interview questions that electrical technician working at a Duke Energy or working at a energy, electrical company, right? And you can find some of these, scenario-based questions that they could ask. But if they do have that situation, they're Duke and they have a government as a customer, 9 times out of 10 is going to have something to do with some conflict with the project or something to do with the contract, unless you're customer residential facing, then it's probably going to have something to do with a residential person not happy about their bill, not happy about the service, maybe their electrical bill is too high. It could be that with the government, but a lot of times when it's government based, it's probably going to have something to do with some type of electrical issues, something's not working or something like that. They just want to know that if it's a customer, what are you going to do? Well, you're going to do the same way that you would do in your behavioral questions, even if it's hypothetical. What am I going to do? I'm going to listen to the problem. I'm going to try to walk through the solutions. So you're going to say something like, I'm going to try to work through the issue together with the customer until we can come to a solution, right? They may not be happy with the answer, but at least I'll make sure that they understand how we arrived at that solution together. You say it like that, they're going to love you. Why? Because they're going to know that you understand that the customer is always first. Even if they're wrong, even if the answer is no, you know how to be empathetic enough to a customer that you will listen to their problem regardless of how they're positioning it to you. So it don't matter if they're all up in arms and all that. You're going to listen to their issue, and then you are going to try to work through the issue with them and come to a conclusion. They just want to know that you have the ability to do that. If it's a coworker, it's going to be something similar to the hypothetical from the behavioral question. It could be, tell me what you would do if, right? So you're going to think about, as much as you can, what type of project stuff would I be doing with a coworker at this job? 9 times out of 10 is still the coworker's non-performing, right? It's always a non-performing coworker. What are you going to do? Well, even if they place you in that company in this hypothetical, you're still going to do the same thing. You're going to go to the coworker and you're going to offer up your support. That's what I want to know. Can you go and offer up your support and see what you can do to help that coworker to get it done? Right? Or you're going to offer up some solutions to the coworker. And then lastly, most times they don't really like to ask those manager questions because they don't like being told, oh, they never like to put themselves in a I'm not doing something right position. But, in some cases they will ask, okay, give me what would you do if your boss, gave you conflicting information? Because sometimes they may say at the type of work that we do, you may have to switch gears a lot. Like, can you do that? If your boss told you you're going to be over at this project on Monday, but then come Monday, he says, oh no, we need you over at the other place. Can you work with him? What would you do? Um, I would say, well, if there's a conflict, maybe if I was supposed to be here on Monday and we were finishing up something, but he wants me to go over to the other situation, to the other, project, I would say, hey, we do have this deadline over here. What I was thinking, would they want to know that you can offer up a solution? I may ask him, do you want me to finish this up in the morning and go over there in the afternoon? Or would you like me to try to push back the due date on this one so I can go do the other project? I'm offering up solutions. So they will know that you know how to manage up. You know how to go back. You know how to go back to your boss and not just be like, "Oh my God, I don't know what to do. He wants me there. He wants me everywhere." No, you know how to manage up. You know how to offer up solutions. So that's all it is, right? So behavioral questions is how do you behave in the past? They want to get a sense of, do you know how to deal with customers? Do you know how to deal with coworkers? Do you know how to deal with managers? In stress related questions, they're just placing you inside the company, same type scenarios, just scenarios that are specific to them, but under the same guise. Do you know how to deal with customers? Do you know how to deal with coworkers? Do you know how to deal with the boss? Hopefully that makes sense. Now, some questions should never come up in an interview. Sometimes they do because the interviewer doesn't know any better. The reason why I say they should never come up because these questions are illegal. Like there's this thing called discrimination that's still in existence. Even though now, who knows? But age, disability, ethnicity, gender, marital status, religion, those things should never be discussed in an interview. I don't care if they come up, by mistake. You may have an interviewer that just had a baby and the person is really happy. The baby's all on their desk or whatever, and they're talking about their baby. Something happened. Maybe they got a phone call and you're all excited because maybe you had a baby. Don't tell those people your business. Don't not talk about your baby. You don't know what their situation is. You don't know if their boss was upset because they were gone for 3 months with the kid and now they just got back, and you don't want them all excited saying, "Oh yeah, Cynthia, she's just had a baby too." And now the boss is thinking, "Oh, here we go with that." Like, keep your business to yourself. If they talk about anything personal, just nod your head. "Oh, that's nice. That's a beautiful baby." Do not offer up any personal information about yourself. I don't care if you walk in there with Coke bottle glasses and the person might be thinking, can they even see? They cannot ask you, are you going to be able to do the job, with your eyesight? Like, you'd be surprised what people will say. They should know better never to ask. You do not have to answer any question. That has anything to do with this. I don't care if you're a female and you walk in there looking 7 months pregnant. They can't ask you, "Oh, when are you due?" Because you don't know how people judge, right? So they should know better. The HR department should say, "Don't ask anything that's illegal to ask." You can't, I don't care if I have a hair full of gray and they're thinking, "Oh my God, this person is about to retire. Do we really want to hire somebody old?" Like, ageism is a big issue. You don't know. I could just gray prematurely. There are people in their 20s with gray hair. Don't sometimes they'll try to beat around the bush and try to get to know your age, because at that point you're not giving them any personal information. They don't really know how old you are. They can't try to beat around the bush and figure out your age. That stuff is illegal. You do not have to ask. You don't want to be judged by anything but the words that are coming out of your mouth. If you choose me or you don't choose me, it's going to be based on my abilities, not on anything personal. So I don't care how tempting it is. We always want to try to build rapport with people by telling our personal business. Do not do that in an interview. You don't know these people, they don't know you. If you want to build a rapport, wait till after you get hired, right? Be friendly, but don't tell your business. But what questions can you ask? It's okay to ask things like, where are they in the hiring process, right? That is something that is normal. You need to know, am I the first person being interviewed or am I the last person being interviewed? Am I going to be waiting for 3 weeks until you finish with everybody? Or should I expect to hear back next week because I'm the last person that you've interviewed? Totally okay to ask. It's okay to ask, if they haven't mentioned it, if it's a new project, if it's a project that you're taking over, you know, um, was there somebody there before me? You need to know, like, did this person leave 2 weeks ago or 2 months ago? Like, what am I walking into? It's good to want to know what you're walking into. Are you going to hit the ground running on the first day? Or are you going to be in training and it's going to be a slow moving train because maybe the project hasn't started? So anything along those lines are fine to ask. Maybe you had a question because they mentioned multiple projects, and it seems like, okay, if I'm doing multiple projects, maybe I'm going to be working more than 40 hours. This is where you would ask those questions still in a nondescript way, so it doesn't seem like you care one way or the other. Don't play your hand. So if they say, "Oh yeah, we have these two projects," like I said, maybe they already told you from the beginning that one is wrapping up and then you'll be doing the other one, but still you may have to do those two. That means you could be working more than 40 hours. So you may say, "Oh, okay, so do we normally work overtime, or is that something we get done within the 40 hours?" Totally fine to ask. They may say, "Oh, no, man, we don't really do a lot of 40 hours. It's more like 60, 70 hours. I hope you love overtime." Maybe that's exactly what you wanted to hear. "Yes, I do love overtime. Thank you so much." You can say, "Oh, no, no, yeah, I'm used to working overtime," and leave it at that. Don't be like, "Yeah, man, I need that money." Don't tell your business, right? You got that question answered. Move on to the next thing. Be friendly, but do not show your hand. Why is that? Because you don't want to talk about money until after you've gone back and assessed the situation. Here's what they are going to do. Everything you say can and will be used against you to judge you against the other candidates. Even something as that you may have thought was not important. You asking too many questions about money, too much about overtime, you mentioning that you have issues with travel. All that stuff they're going to factor into it when they're judging you with the next person. That's why you're not going to tell your business. You only want them to judge you based on how you answered the questions that they asked you, right? So they're going to go back and they're going to compare you. That's why they ask all the candidates the same 10 questions, and they're going to compare your answers to somebody else's. Will they factor in things like rapport and if you had a good energy? Of course. But at the end of the day, a lot of times their top boss or whoever else that they're talking to, they've never met you. So they're really relying on what that interviewer remembers about you. What do you want that person remembering? You want them to remember the words that came out of your mouth. So that is why you want to stick to the script so that the things that they remember are what you said, the positive answers that you gave, not your dog that you were talking about for 5 minutes because they got a dog and you got a dog, because their boss is not going to care about the dog, okay? They're going to care about the words that came out of your mouth as it relates to the job. That is what you're going to talk about. Once they figure out, because the job may say, okay, it pays between 25 and 40. What they're trying to assess is number one, your skills compared to the next person, and number two, what can they bring you on at? If the things that you've said, oh yeah, I've had some project management experience, oh yes, I've worked on multiple projects, that could be the difference between 25 bucks an hour and 30 bucks an hour, right? Maybe the next person didn't have project management experience. They're not going to know what to offer you until after they've interviewed with you. So they're going back to their corner. They're going to huddle together to decide how much we want to pay this person. They're going to then tell the HR person, and then they're going to send you an offer. Conversely, while they're in their little corner huddling together, you're going to go back home and you're going to decompress and you're going to think about that interview and you're going to say, okay, I know that they said between 25 and 40. What am I comfortable accepting to do this job? You may say, well, man, this job sounds about at least 30 bucks an hour. They want me to do project management. They seem very excited about my project management experience. I hope they offer me 30 if they do come back. The HR is going to come back to you and they're going to say, you know what? We really are impressed with what you said. We think we'd love to bring you on at 30 bucks an hour. Ding, 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 ding. Now it's perfect. You thought 30, they thought 30. That's why you never ask about money because you never know until after it's over. Does that make sense? All right. All right. So that being said, we know we have to prep. We know that's why we want you guys to do those mock interviews. You're working with career services. This is not something that we get down perfect unless we prep. So hopefully that makes sense. All right, guys. That's why y'all know this, the drill. What to do the night before, arriving early, know where you're going, yada, yada, yada. If you want to see a mock interview in action, there is one on your if you go onto your home page and you click on modules at the top, I put a little mock interview. You can kind of enjoy that and see one in action, you know, so you can see what to do. And this is even good if you, I mean, I know you guys are going to do one all together, but you know, if you were doing any practice interview, maybe career services may have you do one before they, you know, send you out to get a job or whatever. It's good to see that in practice. All right. So with that being said, here's your conference question for today. I just want to know, I want you to name 3 things you're looking for in a company. As we are starting to say, okay, what my long-term goal is, we have that now. What is the first job? What's the first type of job am I looking for? I want you to think about what are 3 things you're looking for in that company. Your assignment for today, guys, has to do with um, another tool that you'll learn about. It's called informational interviewing. In chapter 10 is going to talk about informational interviewing. The assignment for today, outside of the participation question, asks you to name a person. Remember how I said that your uncle, you know, hypothetically could have a an electrical company. I want you to think about somebody that you know. It could be a family member, an uncle, or one of your instructors, anybody in some type of management role that you can go and pick their brain. I want you to tell them your long-term goal and get their feedback. You don't have to do that today. I just want you to give me the name. So the assignment says just to give the name. So if you want to think about that, and you don't have to do it today, make sure you do it by Sunday. A name of a person that you want to interview. And by next, and when I say interview, it's just having a conversation with. So an informational interview, and it's all about you just having a conversation with them. So by next Wednesday, I want you to have talked to them, told them what your long-term goals are. In the assignment, there's some questions that I've given you that you could ask them. But what is this all about? This is all about you getting comfortable talking about your long-term goals and getting their feedback. So for today, the assignment is just to give me the name of the person. All right, make sense? All right, y'all, quick reminder that tomorrow is your midterm. We are only going to be in the live session for maybe the first 5 minutes because we're really small, so we don't have to be here a long time. And then I'm going to release you to do your midterm. Your midterm has already been open. You can do it at any time. You don't technically have to do it tomorrow. You still have until Sunday night to do it. But because tomorrow is the official test day, we're not going to have a full live session. So just let you know, if you come here after 5 minutes, you could just jump on get the video and get the live conference question, because tomorrow is technically your test day. All right. All right, my friends, have a great evening, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.
Thank you. You as well.